Hello and welcome to the Fresh Podcast, where we bring you everything fresh in entertainment. I'm your host Seth Chapman, and joining me is Robert today. Robert, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Seth. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you for asking. So now, notably absent, of course, is our regular host Drew Brumfield. Right now, he is recovering from some sort of music fest. I'm sure he's posted about it a lot on social media. I haven't paid any attention to it, but we are wishing him well. And also the topic we're talking about is maybe a little bit out of his wheelhouse. He's probably a bit too busy playing Mortal Kombat 1 right now as we speak.
Probably
Um,
so.
so, yeah, so right now, what I'll do is just go right into it. So, Robert, right now, we are in the midst of AAA gaming season. Started like about a month ago with the release of Armor Core 6. In the past month, we got Starfield. We got Mortal Kombat in the next month. We are getting Super Mario Brothers Wonder and Spider-Man 2. And we're even in a time where after close to 3 years of patches, Cyberpunk is finally finished and is actually decent now. So that's cool. That's the era we're living in.
And don't forget
Um,
the new Assassin's Creed release here in a few weeks, and the
yep,
obligatory Call of Duty release. Gotta have those.
yep. And then Modern Warfare 3. Just it's honestly we are in the like full swing with like a lot of the AAA marketing machine. Like we are seeing like all kinds of like videos and ads for all this shit all over the place. And I think when we're dealing with all these crazy big AAA games, when I this was actually your idea for the podcast is we should focus on indie titles, and I think now is the most appropriate time to do it. I'm afraid that sometimes when we get all caught up with like the biggest titles of the year, um, indie titles tend to get like sort of lost in that flood of AAA releases. Um, so since this is your idea, Robert, I kind of want to start with you. Why do you think it's so crucial to talk about indies? What kind of part do they play in the gaming industry overall, you feel?
I feel like it's a lot more of like the creative outlet per se for video games. Not that video games aren't a creative product, but what I feel is that especially nowadays, the AAA gaming space is kind of samey. Like they tend to play it safe with the big releases, and they're kind of afraid to try new things with like ideas. So that's kind of where I think indie games really shine, is just taking these ideas and going all out with them. Typically they don't have the budgets that like Sony or Microsoft gives their studios. So they kind of have to think a little more outside the box. And that's generally what you really see them shine at is they'll take an idea, flesh it out as much as they possibly can, and leave like a really interesting gaming experience that you wouldn't normally see in like your Call of Duties, Assassin's Creed, so on and so forth.
I have to agree a lot with those points, especially with what you say about like kind of a lot of the AAA industry is just sort of like taking, just kind of recycling a lot of the same ideas in that sphere. Um, I feel like a lot of times they could, especially nowadays, a lot of AAA games can kind of feel safer, predictable. And I mean, I kind of get it. You know, a lot of these games have multi-million, billion, sometimes dollar budget games. And it's like when you have that much money being funneled into like making a video game, obviously you have like investors who are going to be like, well, if we're going to put this much money into it, we got to make sure we cast the widest net possible. We have to get in as many players as possible. So we have to throw in what's popular with players. Skill trees are popular with players. Crafting is popular with players. Right now, I'm in the midst of Starfield, and as much as I like it, like yeah, this is very much like a product of that era where it's just kind of like everybody wants side quests, everybody wants like big stories and blah 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 blah. The top end graphics. Um, but I feel like I agree with you where um, and I promise you, if you're listening to this, we're not going to make this whole podcast just bashing on the AAA industry, just a little bit of like jabbing. Um, I think the thing is like a lot of times because of those massive budgets, they have to play it more safe. They have to chase the popular trends. And with indies, they're often more restricted. They don't have as much of a budget, but at the same time, you feel so much more of that passion, as you mentioned, start to come through with that product because they focus on their strengths and they play to it. They don't have enough money to like do a bunch of different things. They can't just basically be like, let's throw in like a crafting mini game or some crap, because if they do, it's gonna take a substantial piece of their budget out, and it's gonna lack the focus. I think what you find is interesting in indie game spaces too is that they deliver also on specific niches and genres that sometimes you just don't see anymore. Like for example, a game that I saw released like last month was Bomra Cyberpunk, which is a uh, spiritual successor to Jet Set Radio. You know, it's very much all about that like kind of early 2000s sort of like punk and hip hop sort of like style music, all set to you just doing like sick tricks and grinding on rails and all this stuff. Games like that don't really get made anymore. And I think it's really I think it's really interesting that like a team is actually like, well, we'll make our own version of it. And then go to a little bit more broader than that. There are so many Metroidvania games out there in the indie space. It's crazy. I don't know if you watch him, Robert, but one of the YouTubers I like to watch is Indie Mouse. And yes, he does a lot of horror games, but he also plays a lot of Metroidvanias. And some of the games he discovered is mind blowing. One video he did recently was a game called Gunbrella, which is about a character going around with a umbrella gun. The reason he's doing it is because someone killed his wife with this gunbrella. He's trying to figure out who made it. But like, it's all this like interesting sense of humor and style and art to it. It's fascinating, and it's just like I can see Gunbrella coming from like an indie studio, but I don't see. I would never see someone like Sony greenlight this project.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely not.
um, yeah, and it's. I think you're right. And also, we should note that like indies still get recognition. I mean, like I think a couple of great examples, like in the past like couple of years that have come out and really made waves, is things like Undertale, Vampire Survivors. Some of my personal favorites also like Death's Door, Tunic. Those are games that have like come out within like the past 6 to 7 years, and they have really like I feel like made a splash with their respective audiences. Um, Sorry, I feel like I'm rambling on a bit, but like I really do want to celebrate the indies, because like I feel like, hey, the big titles, they're gonna get all the love they want in the world. Everyone's gonna be paying attention to them already. So we should shine a light on the little guys. So to keep this moving forward, I Robert, since this was your idea initially, I kind of want to throw it to you. We're gonna talk about some indie games today that we've been playing. And Robert, I want to hear, what indie game do you want to talk about today?
Something that I've been really excited for ever since it was announced was Sea of Stars. Um, that has been an indie that's been getting a lot of like recognition, especially because it launched on both Xbox Game Pass and the PlayStation Plus Essential or not Essential Extra. So if you're subscribed to any of these online services and pay that extra dollar, you do have access to this game. And it is one of the best RPGs I have played in recent memory. Um, the game is a prequel to the studio's first game, The Messenger, and it's also not super connected to it aside from references. So even if you haven't played The Messenger, it's a game that is very approachable. Its story is very standalone, and it's entirely different type of game too. So if you tried The Messenger and it wasn't your cup of tea, then maybe you'll like this game. Um, so to kind of break down what Sea of Stars is that it's a turn-based RPG that is inspired by games like Super Mario RPG and Chrono Trigger from the Super Nintendo era. You can definitely tell that with like its world design, how like it turns into like the battle transitions start of that take place like on the world map itself. Um, Heck, they even got the composer for Chrono Trigger. I'm forgetting his name, but they got him to actually compose some of the tracks too, and they blend seamlessly with the other composers' tracks. Um, I really love the battle theme for this game. It kind of changes depending on what area you are. but it's still like the same like core song. So I like how like adaptable it is. Like, oh, and like this one zone, it might have a little more haunted theme because it's like a spooky area of the game. Or even in like the tavern, you might see like the group of pirates play like a I guess a tavern version of that song. It's a lot more like chill. You get like the accordion with it. It's cool how dynamic the music gets. But I'm rambling too much about the music. I want to talk more about the gameplay. So when you get into combat, they do a really interesting take on turn-based combat system. So it's not a game where you would think, "Oh, this is like an old Final Fantasy. You just press attack and win." No, this game will not let you do that. Your health pool is very small, your magic pool is very small, and enemies can hit very hard if you're not careful. So you really need to strategize. So a way that you can get a leg up in battle is that occasionally enemies will have like these locks appear above them. They might show that they're weak to sword, they might weak to light, or like the water magic that like Volair gets. Um, and if you break these locks, you will take the enemy's turn for them. However, if you don't break the locks, then the enemy can either heal itself, call reinforcements, or launch like an even more devastating attack. There's a lot of things that can happen if you don't break these locks, but when these show up, you might have like 2 turns, 3 turns, or whatever to try to break them all. And if you, I'm like going too fast here.
No, no, you're
Yeah.
good. Keep going.
So, what some of the strategy in this comes from is your MP management. So, as I mentioned, you have limited amount of magic, and a lot of your magic abilities cost quite a bit of MP in terms of like your general gauge. So, like, if an enemy you need to break it with like 2 light magic, and you don't have enough for that, then you may not be able to break it. However, you might be able to do a bit of like team composition to where, oh, if this one character doesn't have enough, maybe you can do like a combo attack where you might get those 2 hits in. There's a lot of different strategies you have to take in if you like, because gosh, I am like all over the place.
No,
If you
you're
don't
good.
manage your MP right, then you're going to be hurting quite a bit. So it very much encourages you to take your time, think out a strategy, and execute it, and see that it it's a really intricate gameplay system. And this doesn't even I didn't even bring up the fact that this game does the timed hit system like from Super Mario RPG. So if you are like attacking an enemy, as you're like swinging your weapon or any other animation tell, if you press it at just the right time, you can get an additional attack in. And this becomes more prevalent in some of the other characters' abilities. Like you get a character named Sarai who has like this throwing knife ability where she'll jump through portals and throw throwing knives through them. If you keep timing them right, she's just going to keep jumping through portals, go faster and faster, and you have to keep up with it. And you could do a ton of damage, break a ton of poison locks with it. It's really satisfying to pull off. And this occurs to like every spell, every ability. There's always some kind of timing you can do to get a little more healing, a little more damage. And this also is something important with your defense. So when enemies will attack you, if you time the blocks just right, you will take less damage. So it encourages you to keep paying attention and really learn these fights because enemies will always have a different timing. Generally, you might start to get a feel for it just through like paying attention to animations and whatnot, but there's always a very clear tell for when the enemy is attacking, who is attacking. So you will have time to learn, and if you don't block it the first time, it's not going to be that imperative. These fights aren't going to be make or break. If you don't block everything perfectly, you're done for. It's an extra bonus for skilled play, so it keeps you on your toes the whole time. Because that's a problem that I find in a lot of RPGs is that eventually you just get really overpowered. so you don't need to pay attention to fights. So normal encounters you might just want to skip past because you're kind of sick of fighting the same thing and doing the same thing over and over. Sea of Stars takes that and throws that out the window. And every encounter is going to be something you need to pay attention to come out on top. Because even in like the later game, if you get careless, you will die. Simple as that. So it's a really neat system that I think it really works for this game because that's that's kind of a problem with a lot of RPGs, like I just said. If what am I looking for?
How about like maybe Final Fantasy VII? We could just use that as an
Yeah,
example.
so like
FF7 remake.
Final Fantasy 7, um eventually you'll just kind of have like a strategy that just works for every fight. It's like, oh, you get holy magic, just cast holy, all the enemies are done, just move on to the next fight. This game not so much. And also, another point about these encounters is that there's no random encounters in this game, and there's not too many encounters. So it's one of those games where you don't need to grind or farm experience to like get really strong against these fights. Generally, the difficulty is balanced in such a way where as long as you're doing like every fight like as you come across them, you will be leveled properly to get to the end of the game. You should never have to feel like you're going to have to stop for a bit and keep fighting enemies until you're strong enough to move on. If you just keep at its pace, you'll be fine throughout the whole game. So I think that's
I,
something that works really well for it.
and just to touch on to that as well, we've sort of chatted about this game a bit off off the mics, and one thing you told me is that the game is very short. It's only
Yes.
about like what, like a 20-hour runtime to beat it.
Yeah, just about 20 hours. Like a
Roughly
normal playthrough.
roughly around that area when most of these kinds of like RPGs, just in general, usually when you hear the word RPG, you're immediately thinking like this is going to be like a 40 to 50-hour experience, probably much longer than that too. I'm looking at you, Persona 5 playthrough, where each one takes me about 120 hours to complete. I'm a madman. But anyways, getting back on track with like Sea of Stars, I agree with uh, I can't say I agree with it because I've only played like the first 30 minutes of it just to kind of get a feel for the game. And 30 minutes is not enough time to get a feel for this game. Definitely not. But I think one of the things I like about your points is like because of how short this game is, because of the lack of random encounters, it does make the player approach each combat situation to where it's not just a mook fight. It's not just the thing where like, oh, I'm going to go in, bulldoze these guys and move on to the next fight. You have to think things through. You have to think carefully about like who you're fighting, your turn order of your characters, what abilities you're going to use, and what weaknesses you're going to exploit. Um, I play a lot of RPGs, and I agree with you, Robert, where there is a lot of times where it's very easy to just sort of like just turn off your brain and just like, yep, I'm just going to bulldoze these like little like gremlins or whatever. They're lower level than me. I'm like super high level now. It's like whatever. These fights don't matter. It's very easy to fall into that, and it's nice that like a game is. I think the key word is engaging. They
Mm.
are staying with the player. They're like, hey, you can't fall asleep at the wheel here. You actually have to pay attention to what's going on, what you're fighting. Kind of the, and it makes me kind of, what makes the game unique is the fact that it is a shorter RPG. And it kind of makes me wish that I understand why, like I said, I know there's going to be a little bit of AAA bashing here. I understand why you can't have AAA developers just basically be like, why can't you just put out like a tiny RPG? When you have that big of a team, it's going to be like, it's got to be a big game or, whatever. But I do kind of wonder, it's like, look at something like, for example, Square Enix, whenever they make a Final Fantasy game, what would a smaller Final Fantasy game, like, let's say they managed to keep like the insane graphics and like all the effects, but what would a smaller scale Final Fantasy game look like where like no random encounters, not a lot of side quests, you are just focusing on the story and very curated combat sequences? Like, what would a tight, narrow Final Fantasy game look like? Um, And I kind of appreciate that about Sea of Stars is the fact that like they're like, hey, we were making like an RPG that you can knock out in maybe like a week. That's reasonable.
Yeah.
I think that's really neat. And one thing I kind of wanted to ask is, so since you're talking a lot about the combat and you've already kind of mentioned what this combat system offers that's different from a lot of other turn-based RPGs, uh, and you mentioned this specifically with fights, did you ever find yourself in certain like boss fights, for example, that really forced you into a situation where you had to pay attention to them, pay attention to not only their move set but also like your party's own move set?
Yeah, I think like a big standout is one of the arena fights where you're constantly having to like shut off locks for like these chests that spawn more mooks. So I'm trying to manage everybody's MP to make sure that everyone has enough magic to exploit the right weaknesses. And even in like some of the main fights, like the Kraken fight, for example, that's a very popular fight that has a great theme to it, but that fight you're constantly having to manage like your poison magic, your water magic, just to make sure that hey, you have enough to break everything. um like those fights in particular kind of stood out to me. But yeah, a lot of like the boss fights I think are very well designed for that. As I'm sitting here thinking, there's an optional fight after you beat the game. You can go back and do some post game content. There's one fight that you can go do against one of the tutorial bosses, where the two main characters, Zale and Valaire, have to like kind of prove themselves. You can go back to fight him again with just those two, and it's a real test of managing like your combo meter, your magic meter, your regular attacks to like spawn magic orbs. Because that's something I also forgot to touch on, is how you restore MP. Because you can use it up, and then if you do like normal attacks, you'll gain magic, but you'll also generate these orbs that appear on the field. If you hit the right trigger, you can like collect these orbs, and they will augment whatever move you're gonna use. So like if you're using like Zale's sword, if you pick up one of those magic orbs, you'll get solar magic applied to your like your weapon, so you can do both solar and sword damage to it. And you can stack up to 3 orbs. Only 3 orbs can spawn on a field at a time. You stack up to 3, you'll get the biggest effect, so you can do some really good damage if you have like the right setup. um but for like this boss fight, it really tests like your knowledge on how to manage all your resources properly, and it was really rewarding to complete, because I actually lost against that fight a couple times just from a few careless mistakes. Because I was trying to save up for like this big damage, but I was neglecting my healing. And when I realized it, I didn't have enough MP or food items to like really restore my health and magic. So I lost because I wasn't prepared correctly, and I got a little careless at points because I thought I was near the end of the fight. So I focused too much on damage and not enough on defense.
Gotta pay attention. I
Yeah.
think I also you mentioned that of like the post game content. I do love that anytime a game has like a post like super boss, it's like, hey, if you want like the ultimate challenge, like this is it. This is the biggest test that the game can put you through. And I'm always a sucker for those kinds of like post game content. I think it's always like a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Um,
I've still been working through the post game concept myself, because it's a game that has multiple endings, like a true ending if you do all the post game content. But the
oh,
game
that's
is
cool.
so fun that you kind of want to go back and keep playing more. Because there's always new fights to try out. There's collectibles you can go back and get, and it's just very rewarding to do. And I'm curious to see what this true ending holds, because I feel like it's going to have some tie into the messenger in some way that would be pretty rewarding to me, since I played a lot of the messenger.
Right. No, that would be cool. Um, Speaking of like kind of story and how everything is tied into it. So what little I played of this game, there were two things that stood out to me. One, you got to pick your main character at the start between the two. Now, now the game does say it doesn't really impact the story that much, if at all, depending on who you pick, because you can also switch between them. All right, so you answered that first question. The other thing I noticed is the game is kind of set up with at the very beginning with a sort of frame narrative. You kind of come into this like library. There's this mysterious person kind of talking to you, and kind of like, I'm going to tell the story about these people who fought the Fleshmancer. Um, and then that's where it kind of begins. So one thing I usually find with a lot of these like sort of like RPGs, especially with JRPGs, is it emphasizes a lot of about the story of the party and the characters in it and their relationships with each other. So, kind of, Robert, I want to pick your brain and your thoughts. What did you think of the story and characters of Sea of Stars?
I think the main story itself is pretty good. I wouldn't call it my favorite story, but what I think this game really shines is the characters. Specifically Garl. I think Garl is probably the best written character in the game, and he's also fortunately around for most of the game because his relationship with the two main characters, Zale and Valer, is so believable that you can tell that they grew up together and were very close. So it's nice to see them all get to travel together and to see how pure of a person Garl is despite going through a very rough incident as a kid. Like the way the game was set up at first, you would think like, oh, he had this traumatic experience as a kid, and this turned him like evil. No, he doesn't do that at all. He is a pure soul, and I am so happy that this game has like a character that you could really get behind like that. And this kind of goes for all the party members. I just really like the writing for all of them, even though some are more obvious, like they're doing a certain thing than others. Like I really like this character you meet later on called Sarai, where she's like an alter ego of another character you met. That's a part of like this band of pirates, and the pirates are such fun characters because they just poke fun at the RPG genre in general. Like there's a character that mentions like collecting these items and stocking them up for like the final boss in case they because they don't want to not have the resources for that fight. And then it turns out after they fight that boss they don't need those resources. So they just kind of hoarded that up for nothing. So it's kind of stuff poking like that that I really like. That's something
It's
that
a
I
little
think.
bit of that messenger writing coming through.
Yes, this team does really good character writing, and that definitely shines in Sea of Stars. Because I just kept wanting to play just to see the character interactions. Not as much with like Zale and Valer, because I think their interactions tend to feel the most bland, I guess, out of everybody. Like, I find the side characters a little more compelling most of the time, though that doesn't mean Zell and Valir are bad. I think that's in a way kind of poking at the genre because generally the main characters are going to be like the ones you're the most interested in. But then in this game you get characters like Garl who get just as much, if not a little more focused sometimes than the main party or the main two characters.
Mhm.
So I think that's a really interesting thing Sea of Stars
It
does.
it seems like a little issue. The it seems like although like the writing for the characters is pretty mostly solid all around. It seems like unfortunately, even with two different main characters, you are still getting main character syndrome from basically both of them. Um, is that am I reading into that correctly, or or it maybe main character syndrome is a bit too vague.
I think
Um,
it's a little vague.
okay, how about this? It's like it's always like the way I kind of view main character syndrome sometimes is sometimes where like you have like all these other interesting side characters, but the main character themselves is like a little bit like on the blander side of things, and they just like they end up being overshadowed by the by the other characters that they're with. That's kind of the way I usually kind of view main character syndrome, I suppose.
Hmm. Yeah, there is a bit of that going on Zale and Valir because they're the chosen ones. They're the important children because they were born on days of the solstice. So um I think Zale was born on the day of the summer solstice and Valir was on the winter, I think. There's like very specific days they were born on, and so they are meant to become solstice warriors because of that. And they're kind of brought up to be like the most important ones. Like they're gonna be the ones that take down the last dweller. They're gonna be the ones that take down the fleshmancer and all that. Um, so that's definitely a very big part of it. And then they also have a couple other little prophecies they have to do along the way. Some of them, which I think matter a little more than others. Um, I really like what they do with Garl's prophecy, but that's uh jumping into a little bit of spoiler territory.
Right. Okay. Um, well, I think another thing we can like kind of touch on is because I remember you kind of mentioned a little bit about like the tavern with the pirates, but like how about how you know what? Before we go into that, I will note a couple of things that I really like about this game. Like I said, I had a very brief experience with it. I only got to play around like 20 to 30 minutes at the beginning. But one of the things I appreciate is the pixel art and what they do with it. As you mentioned before, it's obvious. It's very clearly inspired by like kind of those '90s, kind of early 2000s RPGs, like Chrono Trigger, for example. Um, and the pixel art. And this is kind of a criticism I can see leveled at a lot of indie games is that like, oh, a lot of them are nostalgia baiting. A lot of them just use pixel art styles like Metroidvanias, for example, that we mentioned earlier. All use like pixel art. It's just like they're going for like a retro look, but it's there to cover up like how crappy or just uninspired the game is. But I don't really feel like it's that way with Sea of Stars. The thing that kind of stuck out to me is like, yes, it's pixel art animation, but it is treating it as a genre of art or an art form itself. This is not just pixel art. This is also a evolution of that art style. One of the things, not only do the environments look neat, look nice and vibrant, but also one of the things I noted was I like the touch with the character portraits when they're talking. I like it that they have characters express different emotions in their portraits. I'm coming off of like one of the RPGs I play is Pathfinder Wrath of Righteous, and it's like this big 120-hour RPG, whatever. But one of the things is I love the dialogue, and I even like the voice parts in the dialogue. But one thing I notice is like when you're talking with specific characters, one, not every character gets a character portrait. There's definitely some that are like more important than the others, but also you're just kind of stuck with the same character portrait over and over. So it was kind of refreshing to play a game where when a character is expressing like they're laughing, they're sad, they're angry, it's expressed in the portrait art. I thought that was a really neat little touch. I also like how it's not just like on the bottom of the screen and it's like bottom of the screen text box. I like how they use the placing of it. So I remember one point where it's like both main characters kind of jump in because they're surprised about what they're being told about. So you just kind of get like a little screen shake. It's like bam, two text boxes just pop up. I really think they do a good job of like using that art form to advance it. It's like, how do I put this? The way pixel art was it was back then pixel art was because of the limitations of the systems. That's why they had to animate in that specific way. But it feels like with this team, it's not about the limitations of the systems. It's about how do we use this specific art style and expand on it and make it feel fresh. And I think they really do a good job with it here.
Honestly, I think this game's like lighting system looks better than some of like the HD 2D stuff Square Enix does with like Octopath Traveler.
Mhm.
This game has a really good dynamic lighting system. There'll be points where you could like change the time of day for like the sun to be at a certain spot to cast a shadow a certain way, and the worlds just look really good. The characters look really good, and it shows how much love and care went into this system because the game looks good no matter what time of day it is, and they spent a lot of time going, okay, how could we make this look good at any time? Because generally in these kind of games, areas will be in a very specific time of day and they don't change at all. This game doesn't do that, and I think it looks really good because of it. Um, because that's something that you would see a lot in like the Square Enix like HD 2D stuff again, is that the lighting looks really good, but I think the style gets a little overused because yeah, it looks good, but then that's kind of where it ends. Um, when they first did it with Octopath, it looked unique, but then you see them doing that over their other games. Like I think Live Alive does it, the Switch remake, Octopath 2, the Dragon Quest 3 remake that they're working on. That's also going to have the HD 2D, and they're all kind of going to blend together to where if you didn't already know they were different stuff, you couldn't tell. But for something
Yeah,
like
the
Sea of Stars, it's a very distinctive style to it.
Yeah, I think I kind of understand where you're coming from on that because they all kind of start to feel like they have that sort of like 2.5 HD sort of style where there's going to be like something out of focus or like depth of field like going on, and then you're going to have like extremely like brightly lit light contrasting with really dark shadows. Um, and I can understand where it's just like that might get a little repetitive over time. So I think I could definitely like understand where you're coming from about like doing something a little bit more interesting with those art styles. When Octopath did it at first, it was cool, but now that like Square Enix is kind of revisiting that well over and over, perhaps they can. Perhaps one thing they should consider is maybe doing a little bit more with it. It's just like, okay, now you have this basis of this art style. How are you going to branch out from that? What are you going to do to make it more interesting? But I do appreciate that um, Sea of Stars is specific art style. They do a really good job with like the baked in lighting and like all and like the different like day to night cycles. One thing that I also, and this is like a personal thing, but I also feel like Sea of Stars has a very nice sort of like cozy vibe with RPGs. I see that a lot. In a way, playing that game in terms of its atmosphere reminded me of being a kid and playing like a Game Boy Advance game and just like, I don't know, I'd be playing something like Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass. I know that's not a Game Boy Advance game. That's a DS game, but like it's the vibes I'm getting is what I'm saying. It's that. It's like I'm reminded of something like Stardew Valley where like you just slip comfortably into this world and you just want to like kind of immerse yourself into it.
Yeah, that's kind of the nice thing about like the classic JRPGs that they just have that comfy feel that it's kind of hard to replicate in a lot of other mediums or a lot of other genres, I should say.
Yeah, it really is. But yeah, I really like that with like Sea of Stars. Is there anything more, Robert, that you would like to talk about, like story? I know you were kind of like saying they have like really interesting like characters and what they do with their individual arcs. Is does the main plot kind of do it for you as well, or is it kind of like does it kind of fall into that typical trap of like eventually this party is going to basically fight God by the end of the game?
Um, yeah, the main story itself had some ups and downs. There's a story moment that's like closer to the 3/4 mark that hit really hard, and that kind of had enough momentum for me to keep going to the end. Because I think the start's pretty good. It kind of slows down. Things pick back up for a bit, slow down a little bit. A big thing happens, it picks up, and then it kind of for me carried that momentum through the rest of the game. Um, but it was definitely because I cared about these characters a lot by that point that just made like these moments hit so much harder that made me just want to keep going to the end. Because this was something that was like I remember talking about to like my girlfriend was that, oh, I'm just gonna kind of pace myself through this game, play like maybe like an hour a day or something, just kind of chill through it. And then there was like a big story moment that I just started just grinding out the rest of the game. I would play it for like 3 4 hours at a time, just because
You're just like,
I just wanted
nah.
to keep
It's like,
going.
okay, it's like I'm locked in. Like, yes, I know it's like 2 a.m., but I got to see how this ends.
That's basically what
That kind of
happens.
moment. That's awesome. No, honestly, anytime that stuff happens, it's like Is it terrible for your sleep schedule? Absolutely, but I get it. Like whenever you're that absorbed into a game, you're just like, oh man, I got to see the next thing. Um, well, that's really cool. That honestly, that is really dope to hear, Robert. Um, let me see, and it's nice to see that like there's some so like I assume no fighting god at the end of this particular JRPG.
Not God, no.
Not god. Okay, we'll just settle with that. No spoilers on this cast. All right. Um, One thing I kind of want to know, in my little experience, and I hope you can speak on it, is outside of the combat, I noticed that there was a surprising amount of mobility in how you explored sort of that overworld. You had characters climbing up cliff faces, shimmying along cliff edges, jumping from platform to platform. Do they use that a lot in like the exploration, like maybe finding little nuggets or secrets of like how you can traverse like the overworld elements of it? Because to me it's like I don't really know of many, whereas I haven't played many of these kinds of JRPGs, but whenever I look at a JRPG I don't typically think of those elements of like how your character moves through the world as being very important most of the time in those games, but it seems like it's a little bit more emphasis placed on it here in this game.
Yeah. So this is something that you'll see a lot in like dungeons and some of the later game areas is that you do have a lot of like interesting movement options. Like, oh, you have to like kind of shimmy around these cliffs. Eventually you get like a grappling hook. It's where you can hook off of like these pegs to like kind of fling yourself across gaps. You'll get an ability that lets you like push blocks of like gusts of wind to solve like little like block puzzles. Um, there's a lot of little cool things that you do to where it doesn't feel like it's something that's tacked on. It really feels like a core part of like exploration.
That's awesome, honestly. Like I especially like you saying that it's like no, this is like a key element of like how you explore around, and like find like I assume secrets and loot and like things that help with your characters, right?
Oh,
Maybe
absolutely.
maybe a couple of like secret boss encounters that you weren't expecting in some places.
Generally not the boss encounters, but you'll definitely kind of stumble upon some traps of like enemies, but you get really good items worth it. Like if you go off the beaten path, you'll generally have something that's worth your time at the end.
All right, that's awesome. Robert, I feel like we're in a good spot here with Sea of Stars. Before we decide to move on, I just want to ask any sort of like final thoughts you want to share about this game.
Uh, Wheels is oddly addicting. Uh, Wheels is like this JRPG mini game. It's like this game's version of like Triple Triad or Tetramaster from like Final Fantasy 8 or 9. Um, it's basically this RNG little mini game. You spin a roulette and you get like these pegs. If you get multiple ones, you can like make your units like attack the enemy's like base. um there's like, oh, you stack up enough points, your unit will launch an attack, and you can like build up your defenses to keep enemies from like breaking your health pool and all that. It's oddly fun. I got addicted to it more than I thought I would. And also JRPGs need games like that. They're stupid but they're fun.
Well, you're here to hear. Robert says JRPGs need more fun, stupid mini games. I can dig that. I can honestly vibe with that. Awesome. How do you feel about like by the end of this year? Do you think this is going to be something that you talk about on your game of the year list? Because this is a game that came out this year, came out to Game Pass. You can go get it right now and play it. Um, do you think you might have that? You think it'll like hold up till the end of the year for you?
I think it'll hold up to the end of the year. I don't know if I would call it a game of the year because this year's been so goddamn stacked with like so many good games,
Mhm.
but it's gonna be a memorable one. It may not be like game of the year, but it's a damn good game.
Gotcha. All right. Sea of Stars. It's on Game Pass. Go check it out there if you want to. Um, okay. Thank you, Robert. I am now going to transition. I'm not really good at this shit, but we're going to do it awkwardly into talking about my indie game. All right, Robert. It's now time for you to strap in. We're talking about me. Um, so the game I want to talk about is Ultra Kill. There's a good chance that a lot of people have already heard about it. whether it's through memes, actually seeing people play this game, or Ultra Kill's admittedly very obnoxious fan base. You fuckers just get in everyone's face about this game, and I understand why, but it's like you guys need to calm down. Anyways, so Ultra Kill, what is the deal with it? Ultra Kill is a retro style art. It's a retro style FPS, kind of in the vein of like Doom, Quake, but those elements are married with like the Devil May Cry sort of stylish action games, sort of like Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, where you are ranked and encouraged to do more stylish things in combat, not just the most efficient ways to win in combat. Ultra Kill is technically not finished. It's been in early access since I believe 2019, 2020 ish.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, Robert, it's been one of the best FPSs I've ever played. I've had so much fun. Obviously, we talk about like kind of the comparisons it has to like Doom. The first time I ever started doing this podcast, I believe, was when I did the Doom Eternal review with Drew back in 2020. And I love that game so much. And I can remember comparing Doom Eternal back then to like, this feels like Doom starting to tip its toes into sort of like the combat like ideas of like Devil May Cry. Well, Ultra Kill is about Doom finally embracing the Devil May Cry sort of stylus action subgenre. So here's the deal. In Ultra Kill, the main core mechanic is blood is fuel. The first bit of text you get is mankind is dead, blood is fuel, hell is full. You're going to hell to gather blood because that's what you need to stay alive. You're a robot that is fueled entirely by blood. This isn't just a story thing. This is an actual mechanic. Basically, whenever you shoot an enemy, obviously blood comes out. The best way I could describe it sometimes is the harder you shoot an enemy, the more blood comes out. There are ways you can figure out how to shoot them harder later. But basically what it is like the combat in this game is moving at a breakneck pace. You are constantly in the shit and you have to stay alive. And how you stay alive is like weirdly not by playing it safe, not by sitting in the back of the room and plinking away at these enemies. You have got to stay in the fight with them. You have to get up with them and blast them apart. And whereas the Doom games, for example, definitely push this idea of like execute enemies for health. You have to get up close to your enemies and execute them to get health. That's nice, but you don't even get the benefit of iframe animations to kind of give yourself a quick little breather. You are just in it. You are just gunning enemies down. You are knocking them up into the air and blowing them up into blood showers so you can keep yourself going. And Robert, I gotta tell you, when I play this game, especially the first couple of times I played it, and even during some of the harder encounters, my hands are shaking. It's like I feel cracked out of my mind when I play this fucking game, dude.
That's kind of what I experienced when I played a little bit of it for this podcast. Was that it was non fucking stop.
Yeah, it's because it's everything pushing it. It's the combo meter you have where it's going into like from I think what are the rankings? It's like superior to shitstorm to ultra kill. And it's like bam, it's blaring ultra kill in the right hand corner of your screen. The music is picking up, and then you have like all these enemies just like swarming you constantly. Even on the standard difficulty, it's the game feels relentless. And I don't know. I'm not always the person where it's just like, oh, I love the hardest games all the time, but man, I just love the difficulty in this. Even on the standard difficulty, I really have to pay attention to who I'm fighting, what weapons I'm using, and all this stuff. When I say that this game is a marriage of like the elements between, it reminds me the most of Devil May Cry 3. I really mean it. Tough ass enemies, but you're also given a big ass arsenal to help combat that. And there's just so many things you can do with it. This is a game where you can punch the bullets. You can shoot, you can point blank shoot your shotgun and punch, which is also your parry, at the same time and give it a projectile boost. So you could just like do super shotgun blast where you're just punching the shells right back at enemies. It feels very visceral and chunky and satisfying. There's also like other guns. One of my personal favorites, and Robert, I'm going to assume yours as well, is the marksman pistol. Basically, it's the one where you flip a coin up in the air and you shoot it. You can throw up to 4 coins at a time. It's on a recharge.
Yep.
And basically, it will ricochet off the different coins based on how they're placed. Each shot it ricochets off of uh, multiplies the damage of the bullet, and then it automatically sort of like it automatically hits the weak point of like the nearest couple of enemies. And my God, it's just so fun to use that. It's so fun to use that weapon. In a weird way, it's almost like an aimbot. But it takes a while to get used to. But once you do, like, oh man, it feels so satisfying. Um,
It
did you want
seems
to
it seems like a
go ahead?
game that really encourages thinking on the fly. Like sometimes you just kind of do things, just go in, just play it by ear. I think is it one of those games where enemies generally do the same thing if you replay levels?
Oh yeah, it absolutely is. They're the you are playing against the exact same enemies in each level. I don't know about the higher difficulties because one, this game is in early access. It's not finished. We actually don't have access to the two highest tiers of difficulty. Um, but from what I've seen, the enemies stay the same on like the higher difficulty. Um, and they what it seems like is I don't know if they necessarily get new moves in the violent difficulty, but they do seem to like enemies that previously wouldn't be enraged will get enraged. And enrage is obviously do more damage and they attack much faster.
Gotcha.
Um, but yeah, like I think it's largely like the same way, but you get very familiar with like the enemies really quick. Um, I assume Robert that you got to encounter the stone heads with like they shoot off like the flurry of attacks and they also have the big charge up beam attack.
I don't know if I got that far in. I only really
Okay.
played about 20-25 minutes.
Gotcha. Well, there are those enemies, and what's really fun is like there are all kind. Each enemy you're gonna find has different specific weaknesses that make it easier to exploit and beat them. And sorry, I might spoil a couple of things for you in your playthrough, Robert, but I just
You're good.
figure I can just toss these out. So for example, the rock face dudes are pump out a lot of damage. And but they're also like most of the time stationary. They're kind of like big floating turrets. So they have like a normal like flurry attack where they shoot a bunch of projectiles out that you can parry back. Um, but they also have a charging attack where they'll charge up a something called the malicious beam, and then they'll fire it off, and it's like a big explosive attack that does a lot of damage. There's a good chance that on violent difficulty it might just outright kill you. I'm not entirely sure of that. Anyways, one of the cool things is you can do a move that's called a chargeback, which is basically if you time it right, when that enemy is about to shoot its big like mega beam at you, you can flip a coin, and if the mega beam, the malicious beam hits the coin while it's in midair, it will reflect back onto the enemy and instantly kill it every single time. It never fails.
God damn.
Um, it's so cool. You have to get the timing very precise, and it's not just like having the timing precise. You also have to be precise of like where the coin's trajectory is going to go, so it hits the beam at the right time. But my God, is it satisfying? It's hard for me to pull off on the fly, but I've gone into like the practice mode and done it, and it's a blast. Um, but like the combat is just packed full of these things of why I love stylish action games like Devil May Cry and like Bayonetta is, and also I'll just throw in Doom as well, even though it's technically not a stylish action game, is that they all like have like such a wide roster of enemy types with very specific weaknesses. But there's always more than one way to skin a cat in Ultra Kill. Like you can use this strategy or you can use this weapon and this strategy. Like there's always more than one way to like handle like an enemy. um like for example, one of the aggressive enemies you fight are called the sweepers. They are flamethrower dudes, which in typical video game fashion, they have a flame pack on their back that if you shoot it will blow up and instantly kill them. So yeah, you can try to maneuver around them, and you have a lot of mobility in Ultra Kill. You can try to maneuver around them, shoot them in the pack, instantly kill them, or you can flip a coin over their head, shoot the coin, blow them up instantly. It's actually in my opinion, it's the easiest way to take them out. It's a lot of fun. But If you don't want to do that, they're very aggressive, will chase you anywhere. You can also use what's called the sharpshooter variant of the revolver, which is a charge up attack where literally your character will like spin the revolver like a fucking helicopter.
Oh, I love that
Um,
one.
yeah, and basically you spin it up, and whenever you fire, the bullet will ricochet off of like surfaces. So what you can do is lure the sweepers into like an enclosed area, or really any enemy for that matter, and just like fire it off in like this enclosed area, and it will ricochet multiple times, doing a lot of damage to an enemy. A lot of the enemies it will just outright kill. It's super fun. And I'm just talking about like the revolver. There's also like the shotguns. You'll get shotguns, the nail gun, which I call the chain gun, even though technically it shoots nails. I just call it the chain gun. You get that. You get like a rocket launcher, and they all have different variants and fun little things with them that make them useful. Um, One thing that I think is really fun is you get a rail cannon in the game, which shoots like it's a rail cannon. It's a big straight beam that it shoots out that just does insane amounts of damage and pierces through enemies. Uh, it's a really good weapon. It's also one of the only weapons where it needs time to charge up each shot, so it's kind of like almost like an ability that you're using.
Right.
What I like is there's different variants. There's one that's like the standard railgun shot. There's one that's the more explosive variant that's akin to like the stone faces and their like charge up beam. But there's also a third one that's been kind of memed on that's called the screwdriver, where basically it shoots out a drill into the enemy and it just keeps drilling into them. A lot of players have found that like the damage that the screwdriver does is not a lot, and they're kind of like, well, this is sort of a waste. This is not as good as like the rail cannon or even the malicious rail, of like how much damage it can do. It's just like, why are you wasting your time with this charge up, especially since it's a weapon that you have to wait on to charge up. What I have found though, and what I've noticed from a lot of other people mention, is that the screwdriver is very helpful for actually staying alive. If you have an enemy that is constantly on your ass like a boss that has a lot of health, and you're worried about, can I stay alive through all of his attacks, hit him with a screwdriver. Basically, while they're on you doing damage, they're constantly healing you as well, keeping you alive, and it's buying you crucial time, and it's doing a little bit of extra damage to the enemy.
Mhm.
The screwdriver will also, like, there's certain enemies that you'll come across that can teleport, and the screwdriver will also prevent enemies from teleporting as well if you shoot them with it, which is really cool. And so it's cool that even what is considered might be one of the most useless weapons in Ultra Kill by the community actually has a lot of like really good niche uses, and I find myself using it a lot. So it feels like that there's no wasted space with a lot of the weapons that have been introduced in the game so far. Um, and I probably should dig into like what the premise of this game is. I kind of mentioned a little bit at the start, but the game is about your robot, like I said, going to hell, fighting demons. It's based on Dante's Divine Comedy a little bit. So you are actually progressing through the different layers of hell. Each one is like a different punishment for a different kind of sin, like limbo, lust, gluttony, that kind of thing. Um, and I have to say, the level design in this game is very surprising. Admittedly, the first level is not all that great. You're kind of just moving through a facility, and that's just because you're technically not in hell proper. It's more like a lab where you're about to enter hell. Um, Admittedly, that area is not as interesting, but once you get to the first real layer of hell and you start to notice that like Hakita, the sole developer on this game, he is creating very specific themes with each layer in a very unique way. Sorry, Robert, I think you were gonna say something.
Yeah, I was gonna say the factory is the only part I've really like played much of, and the level design seemed a little repetitive in terms of like aesthetic. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm definitely interested to see how things kind of become a little more dynamic with design.
Um, I can tell you this, it absolutely will. um, I think as you progress through the game, you're gonna. What I love about Ultra Kill is that it has one of the most. I've played a lot of these kinds of boomer shooters, where they are set in hell and you're fighting demons and stuff like that. But I don't think any game has gotten this creative with its depiction of hell as Ultra Kill does. Um, I will try to avoid spoiling the different layers, but I will just talk about the first layer, Limbo. So Limbo in Dante's Divine Comedy and whatever you decide to believe in Limbo, that is the first layer of hell. It's basically like you weren't a bad person in life, but you also didn't do much either. So we're just going to put you into this layer where it's mostly peaceful, but it's also kind of boring. And that's the big emphasis is like the layer of limbo is just insanely boring. The eternal punishment is when your soul goes here, the torment is you're in such a boring area, it almost drives some souls to basically be like, I want to go to a deeper level because the boredom is so bad. I think I'll take on the torture of the next layer just because I am so bored of this, which is insane. And that's Dante's Divine Comedy I'm talking about. I'm not even talking about
Right.
Ultra Kill here.
Yeah, yeah.
So Ultra Kill's take on it is very interesting. Basically, you open up into limbo. It has very peaceful music. There's no enemies or anything, and you are surrounded. It looks like a Minecraft world. Is the best way I can describe it. There's trees, there's blue skies, and all this. You're like, what the hell? But as soon as you also start to notice that you're not in a big open area, you're in a room. You get it next to the walls, you realize all the meadows and stuff are fakely painted on. The birds you hear chirping, you just go behind one of the trees and you just see a little speaker just playing it. I'm like,
It's
this
like
is
fucking.
goofy as
It's
shit.
like some Danganronpa shit over here.
I It is, and it's just like this is goofy as shit, but it's cool. And I won't spoil what changes in the level, but as you play it, you do see like you start to see some of the other elements of the world change and like how the music changes. Oh my god, when the music changes, it's so good. It's so like empowering where you're just like, I want to burn this fucking place down because it's driving me crazy. So I think the depictions of hell are fantastic. Without spoiling, like some of my favorite layer actually is probably, oh god, that's tough. A lot of them are in Act Two. It's probably Wrath and Heresy, um, because like, oh man, I need to rewind a bit. Hold on, before I get into that of like why those are my favorite levels, I need to just talk about like the rest of the game. So the combat is very good. It's very satisfying. Basically, the best way I can describe it is if you think you can do it, you can. If you think you can shoot a rocket and ride on it, you can. You can rocket surf.
Oh hell yeah.
So I think that's like what makes Ultra Kill so fun in terms of its combat. And the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, I kind of want to back off. What I love and sort of hate about Ultra Kill is its community. Um, what's so good is like this game is difficult and there's going to be parts where you might come across like a really tough level or a really tough boss and you're like, damn man, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, this is tough. Thankfully, Ultra Kill's community is so active and so passionate about this game that there are so many guides out there and there's so many people offering tips of like what you can do with this weapon, how to fight this enemy, all this little thing. And it literally feels like everyone is even with like the limited updates we have had with Ultra Kill, it feels like we are getting like some sort of new tech learning. We're learning some sort of new tech every day, and the community is just so active with just sharing that with everybody, and it feels so nice. I think whenever a lot of people might shy away or just really look down on the idea of like, oh, looking up a guide like Dark Souls, like, what are you, a big baby? Like you didn't get the proper experience because you used a guide or you used certain build. And I feel like the Ultra Kill community kind of rejects that outright because the idea is like this game is about personal expression through combat. You get to decide how stylish you are, and there is no wrong way to play Ultra Kill. The only wrong way to play Ultra Kill is you not having fun with the game. That is the wrong way to play. So if you're not having fun, change it up, or maybe Ultra Kill is just not for you, and that's perfectly fine, okay, as well. But I think what I love is like having this active community for a single player game, and they're just constantly talking with each other, sharing ideas, sharing memes about like this game, and it makes me really happy. Of like, and it's why I've stayed so engaged with Ultra Kill for so long. Um,
So you're
let
kind of
me.
drawing like to me some parallels to like the speedrun community because this is something I've been watching these documentaries by Summoning Salt. They're just kind of documenting like the world record history of these games, and it's always incredible to me how social these communities are of one another. Like, yeah, like Zelda Ocarina of Time or Super Mario 64 are single player games, but there's so many people that get together to talk about them, to like discuss strategies and findings for like the speedrun tricks and stuff. And they're always really helpful for new players too, because this is something you often will hear about some speed games is that if you want to get into it, a lot of people are almost willing to bend over backwards just to help you like kind of learn how to play the game at a high level. And you're the way you're kind of talking about this is that there's some similarities there.
Yeah, I think that's a very spot on way of putting it. Is like the speed running community. It's like the same thing with Ultra Kill. I think one of the benefits to Ultra Kill is because it's an early access and we only get some batches of these levels at a time. What you end up happening is it's not just looking at the game as a whole, it's hyper focusing on each individual level, and it's like, did this level add in a new enemy type or a new boss? Did this level add in a new weapon? And the community hyper fixates on it and just shares everything that they can learn about it. And I think that's what makes it so fun. And I'm glad you pointed out speedrunning, Robert, because it's actually speedrunning is kind of a big key point of this game. um First off, you get a lot of movement tech in this game.
Oh yeah.
um like the wall bouncing in this game you would think would be dizzying, but it actually feels very good, where you're just sort of just, it reminds me of a lot of Dante's enemy step, except instead of just enemies, it's everything.
World
If you're
step.
if Yeah, basically, if you can touch it, you can jump off it. Is the best rule I could come up with for Ultra Kill. Now, granted, after around 3 or so times in a row, you are going to get diminishing returns. But the dashing, the jumping, the using the rockets to glide, like I love like the movement tech in this game. And people are always coming up with bigger and like quicker ways to like move around. Whether it's not actually rocket riding, that's different. From what I'm talking about, rocket boosting, where you're shooting the typical rocket jump behavior where you like look down at the ground and you shoot a rocket to like boost yourself up into the air, or you have a slam move in this game. And also, if you time it right with like jumping and slamming, you can actually get an insane amount of air and speed and sliding. The best way to play Ultra Kill is you just need to learn to not walk, you got, or not even run, you got to slide everywhere you go. um it's so much fun. And I thought when I first played Ultra Kill, it's like, this is really fun. I'm not going to go through and S or P rank. P ranking is basically this game's version of S ranking. I'm not going to go through and P rank these levels. But after I accidentally got my first P rank on one level, it was like, I got to do this. I got to go through every level and P rank it. Um, but what's fun is like P ranking a level, it seems daunting at first, especially after a first playthrough. It might take you like 30 or so minutes to get through a level. And then at the end, you're like, Jesus Christ, that boss was tough. And I died 50 times. How in the heck am I supposed to P rank this? Because in order to get a P rank, you have to fulfill 4 requirements. You have to fulfill the time requirement, get an S rank in that, get there as fast as you can. You have to fulfill a kills requirement. Now, for kills, you have to fulfill a certain amount of kills. It's not always every single enemy in a level you have to kill, but you have to get really close to that number. You have to kill close to every enemy. You also have to do it all stylishly too. So you have to make sure you're building up a lot of style points as well. So that means switching out between different weapons, using different strategies, all this crazy stuff. Figure out ways to use the environment whenever you're fighting your enemies, knocking them off of areas, dropping them onto saw traps, things like that, or maybe causing them to kill each other with friendly fire. Those kinds of things to help stay stylish. Um, And then the fourth requirement is do it all without dying. So basically, at the so it whenever it says P rank, it literally means you have to get it all. You have to get a perfect run in. It is daunting at first, but the more you do it, the more you play the game, the better you're just going to get, and you're going to understand it better to where you are just flowing through these levels, and it feels so good. One of the things I really like about Ultra Kill is once you really start to understand a level, most levels won't take you more than 3 minutes to P rank. That's
Right.
like the beauty of this game. And honestly, it doesn't take long to get to that point. You would think, man, I got to be insanely good at this game. Not really. Like that's what I love about this game is like the P ranks are once you actually start going for them and actually start doing them and you understand what you're doing, they're actually fairly I wouldn't say easy, but you start to realize like this is doable. It just requires a little practice.
Right.
Um and I think also the game is very satisfying because we were talking about secret bosses earlier. Um, so it looks like with each act, there's something called a prime sanctum associated with it. Basically, it requires you to get P ranks in all of the respective levels of that act. Once you do, there will be a special door in one of the levels that unlocks that all the P ranks are open. You go through that door, and then you are dropped into the prime sanctum. The Prime Sanctum has some story elements to them that I'm not going to spoil. All I can say is there's only two Prime Sanctums in the game, and they are both immensely challenging. They are the toughest things in the game, without a doubt. If you and basically, and by this point though, you're kind of ready for them because you've already P ranked all the levels to get to this point. So when you do it, yes, you're getting your ass kicked, but you absolutely have earned your right to go against these Prime Sanctums and fight them.
Mhm.
Um, I remember the first Prime Sanctum. It took me about 2 hours to beat it the first time. To beat it, to P rank it, it took even longer. It took
Yeah.
like 3 hours. That was the first one. The second one, and I remember texting you, Robert, extensively during this, was one of the hardest challenges I think I've ever done in the game. And this was on standard difficulty, not even on the hardest difficulty. It was so tough that basically I literally had to plan out a practice schedule for this game
Mhm.
where I would activate. By the way, a lot of neat little assist stuff to help you out. I would activate assist things like reduce damage and all that, and just progressively start to take more and more of the assists off as I became more and more comfortable with that level. I had never practiced so hard at something in a video game ever. I literally not even Devil May Cry 5 going for all S ranks. I did this shit. Um, but man, like once you finally get that, like once you first finally beat the Prime Sanctum, and then you finally get that P rank, you've earned it. It is one of the most satisfying moments, and I don't care what difficulty you play on. You could play on the easiest difficulty and get a P rank on it, and I would still say you fucking deserved it because Prime Sanctums are no fucking joke. It literally requires perfect play to get through it, but that's the point. It's the hardest challenge of the game, and it's going to push you to your limit, and I really love that about a game. It also didn't help that admittedly I am kind of in a weird situation where I did this all on my Steam Deck. Um, so on Steam Deck, you're playing on controller. There's a lot of aim assist at play. Um, and trust me, if you're playing on a controller and how fast this game moves, you're gonna need aim assist. There's just no way around it. Um, But what's interesting is with aim assist, as useful as it is and how aggressive it is against targeting enemies, it still doesn't hold a candle to just knowing certain moves and knowing your enemy's weaknesses. Where you can have all the aim assist you want, but if you don't know what you're doing in this game, you're still going to get flatlined like super easily. Um, and also, one of the things is like the nice thing about it is the aim assist sort of adds like a ceiling cap of what you are capable of. Um, because on mouse and keyboard, there are some strategies such as like, for example, you can make something that the players like to call a nuke. The nuke is one of the shotgun's alt fires is that it shoots out a live grenade, and then you switch to the rail cannon and quickly shoot the grenade and it will like explode into a nuke. It's very powerful. It usually clears out rooms instantly, and yes, it gives you a lot of stylish points. The problem is it's very hard to pull that off on controller with aim assist because the way the aim assist works is it's going to prioritize aiming at enemies more than like the grenade in the air. So you're like 50% of the time you're probably going to miss instead of actually hitting your target. Um, so basically, certain strategies like that are really good for like speeding through rooms or bosses like that and rail coining just become very difficult to pull off because you're not on mouse and keyboard. Robert, you kind of talked with me a bit about this, but I've only played Ultra Kill on controller on the Steam Deck. What has your experience been on mouse and keyboard so far?
It's definitely a little tough because you don't have that aim assist, so it kind of relies on you to be more like accurate of your shots. So I've found myself tweaking the sensitivity quite a bit to try to find like the sweet spot for me because this is a very high action, high pace game. So it's something that I kind of wish there was a little bit of aim assist, but that's just because I'm just trying to learn and get used to the pacing of the game. I think once I like play more of it and like really learn like how you're really supposed to play this, I could probably start to employ some pretty creative tricks because I would try to do some fancy stuff, or at least for like a beginner player thing, like try to bounce off a wall in a boss fight and then throw a coin, try to shoot the coin in the air. Like some really primitive stuff, but it felt cool doing it, you know?
That's the most important thing is you just feel cool playing this game. I think that's the prime directive of Ultra Kill is you just need to be having fun and feeling awesome for yourself. Um, I agree. I definitely see a lot of like people talk about online where aim assist is a little, and this is where I was talking about where the ultra kill community can be a little bit obnoxious. Is like some people in that community are just kind of like annoying. They're kind of like, you're not playing ultra kill properly if you're using any bit of aim assist and you're playing on controller and you're not using mouse and keyboard. What the fuck are you doing? Da, 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 da. But I also appreciate that there is a side of the community that's like, no, the whole point of Ultra Kill is it's about expression of yourself and like how you want to do it. So if you want to use the assist, if you want to use the aim assist, that's there for you. That is the correct, like, I think the motto of the community, in a sense, is the correct way to play Ultra Kill is have fun. And whatever you have to do to make sure that you're having fun with the game is the right way to play it. So I appreciate that. I It puts us in a weird dilemma where it's like, okay, like, are you getting as much of the game out of it because you're making it easier for yourself and maybe you don't have to engage with the systems that much and yada yada yada. And the truth is this is like for the people who really want to squeeze blood from a stone and get as much as they can out of this game, absolutely play on the hardest difficulties, play without the aim assist, play without any of the major assists on, blindfold yourself, uh, pick the setting that makes the game look like just even chunkier than it already looks. Like really give yourself the authentic PlayStation experience,
Oh yeah, that was something that
PS1
was
experience.
that's actually something I found really neat when you start up the game is how you set your like settings before you get into gameplay and how like kind of I guess dynamic it is. It's like you start the game in like a boot up sequence and you have to set your sliders like your robot being powered on. I think that was really cool.
It is neat. It's actually fun, a little like theory. I don't think this is confirmed, but the theory is like since you're playing from like a prototype model in this game, that's why everything looks so pixelated and old school is because actually you're just viewing it through the lens of the robot, so everything is just old. So everything just looks old and crappy through that robot's eyes,
Yeah.
which is a fun little potential detail. I don't know if I believe it, but it's a nice little theory. But yeah, I do agree. Like, I love the customization of like what you can do with it visually. The fact that like I also like the fact that you can not only have it like typical right-handed side of the weapon or center, but there's also a left-handed option, which is neat. I don't think I can think of many games that have that anywhere.
The
My
only thing I
brother,
could
who's
think
left-handed,
of
I'm
the only thing I could really think of is like Counter-Strike Source.
yeah, that's really it, honestly. Like that's the only one I could think of as like a FPS. I'm sure my brother would appreciate that because he's been left-handed all his life. But I think that's neat. And there's also things where you can play with like the modern HUD now. You can also switch back to the old HUD the way it used to look like whenever it was in its very, very early stages. Um, I like him, and like I like the difficulty too. There's so much customization options with Ultra Kill. It's really fun. Um, but getting back into it, I think it just I think what's cool about this game is I think the combat just feels so fun and so dynamic. It has great boss fights, great encounters, curated encounters, and I always feel like I'm learning something a little bit new or training to use a strategy and try to be more consistent with it. And it can honestly make the game like such a blast. My biggest I really don't want to spoil too much of like all the things you are capable of doing in Ultra Kill, and also with you, Robert, especially if you do decide to keep playing forward with it. I don't want to spoil some of the later game equipment that you get because it might really change the way you play. Um, so yeah, I love this game's combat. It's some of the best I've ever felt in like an FPS. It's got that because, like I said, even though it feels and it absolutely is fast paced, it also still feels like it's rewarding the player for like knowledge and practice rather than just twitch reflexes most of the time. That's what I really appreciate about this game.
Right.
Feel like I'm kind of going long in the tooth here with Ultra Kill, so I'll speed things along and talk a little bit more about its story. All I can say about its story is, from what I've played of it so far, it's it's very minimal, but that's way on purpose, where if you want to, there are ways to seek out like more of like what's going on in the story. You can stop by the terminal, listen to some nice music, and also read up about like what's going on in the world. There's like little environmental storytelling pieces. Secret missions often comes with like big lore dumps in there, and the secret missions are just fun in general. Whenever you one activating them is a little bit like you will probably have to look up a guide how to do it, but the secret missions can be everything interesting from like going through like a parody of The Witness called The Witless to doing a fishing mini game to Robert, I really don't recommend this for you. An actual horror sequence in uh actually the very first secret mission you can unlock. Don't do the first secret mission, Robert. It's a horror sequence. um
Is it
Basic
where you got the two like heads fighting you?
No,
Okay, I
that is
found
not it.
one of them where it was like I was like locked in a room with like two of the floating heads with like the transparent like spider limbs.
Yeah. So that is not the horror sequence. That's actually a secret encounter, which is fun. Those are fun. But no, so the secret mission is basically you are put in like a darkly lit maze with just one of the skulls, and you have to use the skull kind of light up the way. You have to navigate this maze, and the whole time it's like there's no sound except for the thing that's hunting you, and you never get a good look at this thing. You just hear it breathing, just like chasing you through the maze. um I don't know how well you'll deal with that, Robert. I didn't deal with it well,
Probably not.
so yeah, you can skip that part. Honestly, there's plenty of people who shares the lore bits of each secret mission, so you can find it there. But yeah, like there's all like these secret missions with like the stories. But what I really love is just the theme of Ultra Kill. Dive, and I think this is going to be very specific, but uh, as a person who's grown up in the South, I've grown up around a lot of churches, a lot of Christianity, and the best way I can describe my relationship with religion is I am agnostic. I'm not really sure if there is or isn't a God out there, and I have very iffy feelings about religion, about how it decides to treat people and decide who is damned and who isn't. I'm not trying to offend anyone. It's just my personal beliefs on this. And but like the Ultra Kill really taps into a whenever you follow the story, it really taps into a specific question and theme that is something that always bothered me as a kid. I think at its core, Ultra Kill asks the question of like, what is hell, and why would God, if he is this all-knowing, benevolent being, create a place of eternal punishment if he is this loving God? do people deserve eternal punishment? Is there really no chance for like damned souls to redeem themselves? Um, these are questions that I really think a lot of games wouldn't ever ask, but Ultra Kill is like doing it, and I think it really and like I said, it really taps into a very specific like thought I had as a kid. Is one of the things that really turned me off with like religion is the idea that like you keep telling me that this is an all-knowing, all-loving God, but at the same time you tell me about that he created a place of eternal damnation, of eternal torture for people because they messed up too much in life, so they deserve to forever be punished. Like that didn't seem fair to me. And I think it's interesting that like a game kind of poses those questions, and you have, weirdly enough, with the few characters that you do interact with, you find a lot of them kind of grappling with that idea of like eternal damnation and what that means. It's so interesting, and you could say a lot of this is in the background, but I find it fascinating. And as a result, a lot of the game just feels tragic when you dig into the stories. A lot of its characters just feel like just tragic, like figures. They're just trapped into this game that they cannot win. Um, and I think the part that really solidified it for me, and it's like why Heresy is one of my favorite levels, is a little spoiler for you, Robert, but the name of the level is called Cry for the Weeper. And whenever you play through it, besides the Prime Sanctums, it is one of like the toughest parts of the game. Besides the Prime Sanctums, it's one of the toughest parts. You're absolutely going to be pushed to the limit, but the way that level progresses and the way it amps up the challenge, but importantly, the music is unlike anything in the rest of the game. I mean, yeah, it's still breakcore like the rest of the game's music that's playing, but like this music that you're listening to is not triumphant. It's not making you feel good. It is like the best way I could describe it is like the guitar is just wailing in this game. It is like bawling its eyes out. The name of the song is sorry, the name of the level is Cry for the Weeper, and the song goes appropriately with that, where like it's almost very like just mournful is not the word. It's almost like screaming against its own fate of like what it's damned to do. And it's around that part in the game where it really got me to reflect on like my past actions of like why I've been playing this game. And I'm like, holy shit, like, am I really doing the right thing here? The best way I can describe it is the last time I felt this kind of dread playing a video game was Spec Ops The Line. If you don't know anything about that game, just look it up, I guess. But that was another game that really got me to question not just like, you know, what I'm doing in the game, but just like my relationship with a video game, about what I derive from entertainment. What am I doing and why are you doing this? And my God, it's just so it's heart wrenching, dude. I'm not gonna lie. The music in the Heresy level did make me cry a bit. I was like, fuck, man, it's beautiful and tragic in all the same breath. I'm not saying it's going to touch people the same way as it did for me, but I find it to be one of the most touching levels I've ever played in a video game. And it's the same one that I'm getting my ass kicked over and over. Like I'm dying, like I'm just crying and I'm shaking on my controller and I'm just dying for the 50th time on this level. And it's just like, fuck me, man. I'm a emotional wreck. Um, but it's my God, it's so good. And this is just Act Two. I can't even imagine what Act Three is going to be like. But I feel like I've talked a lot about Ultra Kill. My jaw is getting sore from just talking about it. Um, but yeah, I think my overall thoughts is this: Ultra Kill is fantastic on so many different layers. It is just one of those games where the more you give into it, the more you're going to get out of it, the more fun you'll have out of it, but also the more existential dread you'll get out of it too. So that's fun. Um, I really recommend this game, even in the current state that it is. Right now, we have 2 acts and 2 prime sanctums and a bunch of little secrets in there. This game is, I would probably say this game is about 60 to 70% done if it tracks well. And honestly, it's worth picking up right now. It is so much fun. I even talked about the cyber grind, which is basically this game's equivalent of the Bloody Palace. it's an infinite bloody palace, and it's a great arena for you to test your skills. Um, it's so good. And I cannot wait for Act 3. But even if Act 3 didn't come out ever, like God forbid something happened and Hakita could just not finish this game, um, I would still recommend playing this game. I would still say like it's absolutely worth your dollars right now as it is, even in its unfinished state. So yeah, that's basically me with Ultra Kill. Robert, do you have anything else you want to add before we move on?
It's something that I definitely want to try to play more of. I was just really tired when I tried to demo it, so I was like getting like pretty motion sick from it. Which I don't know why I was getting motion sick, because generally I don't get motion sickness from video games. But something about the speed, I guess, combined with my exhaustion, just hit different.
Right.
But it's something I
Uh,
do want to give a fair shake when I'm in a better physical space.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where, obviously drink your water, get in a better headspace, but also like I think it's a game where at least finish out the first act because like as much as I said how much time I put into this game about like almost 40 hours or something like that, um, it's actually not that long of a game. Just get through the first. I would probably recommend getting through the first act or at least a good portion of it and see how you feel by the end of it because it probably will take you, Robert, I'd probably say it'd take you about 2 to 3 hours maybe
Hmm.
to get through that first act. um just get through it and see how you feel. If you're not really vibing with it by the end of the first act, then I would probably say, yeah, maybe move on from this game because I feel like Act Two is so much better. But at the same time, I don't. If you're not gelling with the first act, I don't think anything in Act Two is going to sell you on it,
Hmm.
in my opinion.
Gotcha.
Um, but yeah, that's Ultra Kill. Um, and believe it or not, I know we're kind of getting long in this podcast, but what else is new with this show? Um, we are going to now talk about our last game. We're going to talk about Pizza Tower. After everything I've just said about Ultra Kill, now I'm going to have to put all that shit into like Pizza Tower because a lot of the same things I said about Ultra Kill can apply to Pizza Tower. But thankfully, Robert can also speak more on it. So,
Yes.
Robert, my jaw is sore. I don't know how the hell Drew does this all the time. I'm going to let you take the helm for a bit and talk about Pizza Tower.
All right. So Pizza Tower is an indie game that came out at the beginning of this year. I think I want to say around February, but it's been in like I guess early access ish states for like a couple of years now. But Pizza Tower is a 2D platformer that is very inspired by the Wario Land games, specifically Wario Land 3 and 4, because Mario Land 1 and 2 got hijacked. But yeah, so it's a platformer that stars a little fella named Peppino Spaghetti. I think that's his name, and he is running a business that is financially struggling. Um, and
Very relatable character.
very relatable. And he is a man motivated by his stress. Other people might cope with stress to be like very demotivated, very like mellow, sad. Peppino was not that. He takes it out in the most fucking violent, vile manner. And
This dude is like rage incarnate. Like that.
yeah,
Like Robert is not like sugarcoating it. Like it's
like
like no, this.
there you go.
No, you keep going, man.
Okay, okay. Yeah, yeah. So this guy just goes fucking batshit. He's like jumping over enemies, like fucking the jumping off walls, crashing through walls, picking up enemies and tossing them around. Fucking he's he's going insane. That's basically what the gist of this is. That there's this tower that popped up next to his restaurant, and he needs to take it down and get his customers back. Because that's where all his customers are going to be going, is this weird fucking tower. And you go through a lot of these very creatively designed levels. They're pretty straightforward. A little different extra routes for like extra goodies and whatnot. But as as to how the WarioWare game or Wario Land games work, excuse me, um, is that you'll progress through the level normal at a normal pace, and when you get to the end, you'll hit like the switch, and in Wario Land, it's a ticking time bomb. In Pizza Tower, it's like you break this like little dude who's like in the wall or something,
The
and
pillar.
a pillar, and it activates the state called Pizza Time, where you have to rush back to the start of the level as quickly as possible while this fucking batshit music plays. Enemies get more aggressive. Like everything just goes fucking insane. And you get a song that has like the game's like main like theme playing. It's so fucking good. It's like an adrenaline rush every 5 minutes.
God, it is. It appropriate. It's called It's Pizza Time. Um, and my God, you know it's fucking like not pizza time. Sorry. Oh, it is pizza
It
time.
is
That
pizza
is the
time.
uh, sorry, I was thinking of like the other like stress-inducing song. There's multiple stress-inducing songs. I apologize.
But
But you go ahead.
yeah, so you're basically climbing the tower, playing like all these different levels with different motifs. Um, what would you say is your favorite of like the level motifs for Pizza Tower?
Oh man, I mean, like it really is the like like and you hear it like play all the time in like like oh it's pizza time. I think the one I really like though is the second track that you get called the death I deserve Yoli when you do lap two. And yeah, basically when you are trying to go for higher scores, and it's especially needed if you want to go for P ranks. That sounds familiar. Anyways, when you go through the second lap, which is you still have the same amount of time, basically you run back through the level the first time around, you see a portal for lap two, you run through lap two, whatever time you had reaching the end of it is still the same time you're going to have. There's no timer reset. It's like, all right, did you think you get through fast enough to where you can do a second lap of this fucking shit? And then it's just like you go through lap two, and then you get the death I deserve Yoli, and it is like this like mad, insanely awesome blood pumping song. I really like the motif in it because they use because it feels like both like stressful, but also unlike it's pizza time. The death I deserve Yoli kind of has like a sort of sense of triumph behind it, and they actually use little bits of that song in some of the boss fights, especially with the final boss fight theme, which is excellent. That whole big multi-parter, like oh my god. So yeah, death I deserve Yoli is definitely like my favorite of the motif in that is my favorite part.
Mm, yeah. So a lot of this game's humor is derived kind of from its art style. So the game kind of has like this Newgrounds esque like cartoony art style where there's a lot of like very loosely drawn characters. Like a lot of characters go off model very often, and that kind of leads to like the humor of the game. Um, so they play that up in a lot of ways. Um, for a level that really stood out to me, honestly, was kind of like the little golfing level where you had to like is it your golf or baseball is one of the two. Um, you had to like get it to the end of like the goal every time. So you're basically like progressing through like golf mini games or baseball mini games or whatever the motif was throughout the whole level. So I thought that was just a really like unique gimmick with it, and then you also have to do it going backwards on the time limit. So now you got the added stress to that. Um, the another level that stood out to me in a very different way was there was a level that takes place in like this little like theater play thing, aka they just made a Five Nights at Freddy's level, and it's complete with like these animatronics that chase after you. If they touch you, it plays like this really shitty jump scare and sends you like back to the start of the room.
That one is so good.
That
I
was a
love that
really
one
unique
too.
level. That was probably the most stressed I felt playing the game. Was I just didn't want to trigger the jump scares, and sometimes like it was unavoidable to get to combat because it's a level that's almost like a stealth level. So if you like get spotted by the guards, you have like a couple seconds to take them out before like they unleash the animatronic, and just add even more stress to it. Sometimes you need the animatronic to be out to like break through a wall or something. So
Yeah, there's no way around it.
yeah, so you're kind of having to manage all that. And I really love the end of the level where you like you hit the pillar, start the pizza time sequence, and it gives you a shotgun. What is the one thing I wish you had in Five Nights at Freddy's? A fucking shotgun. So you're going through blasting all these animatronics. Like you were afraid of them before, you didn't want them to touch you. Now you're like, "Come here, bitch!" And you just fucking blow them up every time. That was probably one of the most cathartic things in the entire game. It's like a
I was about to
level.
say that that is like the definition of like catharsis, where you have constantly been hounded by these enemies all game, and then finally it's like, all right, tables turn, bitch, it's time to go. And it's
Yeah,
like it. I agree with you. It feels so good to finally get some proper payback against those guys.
yeah. There's just a lot of like creative levels like that where there's like a lot of different like parodies of things. Like there's a Western level, which fun fact, I accidentally skipped the Western level and didn't realize it till the end of the game, where I didn't have enough like money to buy like the last boss. I was like, how did I miss that? Turns out I missed an entire level. So I played through like that big gauntlet level at the end and was like, oh, this is really cool. And then that wasn't my final level because I had to go back and play the Western level again.
I
Um,
say okay, remember.
yeah,
I think we've all kind of like I think that's cool that like you can kind of like skip over certain levels and stuff like that. Like that's on that honestly that is kind of fun. But what's so cool about it though, and I think you pointed out with like the sort of Five Nights at Freddy's one, I think the name of that level is Don't Make a Sound.
yes,
Um, what I love is it's something that most of the time I would frown upon in most other games, but I think Pizza Tower does it really well. Is quite literally each level has a gimmick, some form of gimmick. Whether it's like don't make a sound. You're is a lot of it is it's a stranger like a more stealth oriented level where you're trying to like hide and not get caught by security cameras and stuff like that, or try to break it before they set off the alarm. Um, then another one, like for example, the Western one where basically you get to Pepino gets to ride like the like horse sausage thing and
yeah.
then race like a really irritating like rocking horse or whatever. Um, each level has some form of gimmick, and I love all of them. Weirdly enough, like I don't know about you, Robert, but I actually, in to varying degrees, admittedly, but for the most part, I never found any one level had an irritating gimmick. Like I was never like, God, I hope this level's over with soon. Like they're like all of them were fun in their own way.
The Five Nights at Freddy's level was the only one I felt that way about, but it's because I didn't
That,
want to
that
get jump scared.
understandable. Yeah,
I think that's the
but the
point.
thing Yeah, but the thing is like and like you mentioned before, it tortures you so that you get that amazing payoff where you get the shotgun and you're like, "All right, let's fucking go. You've been harassing me for long enough."
Yeah.
Um
It's one of those
I
where it's like I hated the level, but it's a really good level.
it's a really well designed level. I agree. Since we talked about like some of our favorite levels, I think the one I want to sort of hop in and talk about like my personal favorite level, it's got to be um ooh, let me think on this one. I definitely think my favorite level has got to be the final one. And that's a bit cheating, but hear me out on this. I mentioned this before on the show with you whenever it was a fresh pick, but I figure it's a good place to point it out now. When I mentioned you would do all these gimmicks, the final level is essentially you going through all those previous levels to some degree, and you are using all those gimmicks, but it feels so good. The final level of this game to me feels like a huge victory lap of like, hey, you've gone through all this bullshit, you fought the bosses, which maybe we'll get a chance to talk about in a second, but um you fought the bosses and now here's the last level. Race through the biggest level in the game that's going to utilize all the gimmicks, and it felt effortless almost, where you're just like, yes, you have like a big timer and stuff like this, yes, it's like one of the biggest levels in the game, but like you're familiar with all the gimmicks, you're using all your movement tech. It feels so good because you're putting everything that Pizza Tower has taught you so far to the final test with this last level, and it feels empowering as shit. Not to mention, it has like "Bye Bye There," the song that it's playing. It just like amps you the fuck up. Like it's so good, especially little spoiler when the song really kicks in before that big last hallway of enemies and Peppino is just like just ripping through all of them. It's like, oh my god, so good. Such a good game. Such a good level.
Yeah, I I just love how much personality Pizza Tower has. Like, admittedly, it wasn't a game that really drew my attention much at first, and it was going to be a game that I was going to just skip entirely, but I got gifted the game for my birthday this year. So I was like, you know what, I will give it a try at some point and see what it's about. And I'm honestly really glad I did because it didn't like look like something it was that would be my cup of tea, especially because I wasn't the biggest fan of like Wario Land growing up. But I still had a really good time with Pizza Tower.
I agree. And like I think it's just how much dedication was put into every piece of it. The new ground style animation, the music, the just the how tight the like controls and the levels feel. Like everything feels purposeful and it feels so good to play with. It's one of the most fun games this year. I don't know about you, Robert, but for me personally, it's definitely going to be there on the top of like one of my part of like my top list of this end of the year, where it could definitely be a game of the year contender for me, just because it's all these pieces falling into place and it feels damn near pitch perfect to me. Um, like I struggle to think of anything really wrong with like Pizza Tower. It's amazing. I still pick it up every now and then to like I'm not as crazy like going for it as I was with Ultra Kill, but I am slowly like doing like the peer ranks and the challenges for each of the levels. Um and my god, it just feels so good to just play that game. Um it's definitely left an impression on me unlike anything else. I've never felt so empowered and pumped up to play a game while at the same time just laughing my ass off at it with how expressive like the characters are. Um, because like the animation style just allows for that. Oh my god, it's so good. Um, I think that's a lot on Pizza Tower.
We wanted to
Uh,
touch on the bosses real fast.
Yeah, I think we should. I don't know about you, Robert, but I really like the boss fights. They're mostly simple, you know. You have a health bar here. They've got a health bar. Just recognize their move sets to fight them. But like the Pino is surprisingly effective, not only with his like lunging grab, but also like with all the other move sets he has, like being able to run up walls and parry. Oh my god, the parry comes in so handy with some of these bosses.
Oh, for sure.
Um, but without spoiling it, the final boss fight in this game is a gauntlet, and it's so good. I don't know how you felt about it, Robert, but there's one particular part that should have been in any other game. You would have been like, "Oh, come on, this is stupid." Like any other game that would try to pull this, you would be annoyed by. But when Pizza Tower does it, and what it does with Pepino is like, holy shit, this is fucking awesome actually. um so yeah, I don't really have too much more to add on to the bosses other than that. If you have anything else to add, Robert.
Yeah, it's kind of simple but pretty effective boss design where you hit them a couple times, their moves changed up a little bit, so you're constantly kind of having to adapt to different things going on. So it's a game that's pretty rewarding. That's like trial by error, where you get one phase down, then the next one trips you up. Eventually, you'll just end up perfecting the fight and be able to get through just fine. And it's a pretty satisfying like learning process. And then the fights also don't take too long. Like I did struggle with a fair amount of the boss fights, but they weren't too hard to learn, and they really were rewarding to finish. And you wanted to finish them because you wanted to see more of how like the interesting levels play out. Because again, this game's levels are so creative and so unique that you just want to see what kind of weird thing they're going to try to do next.
Yeah, what other kind of like crazy bullshit that they're gonna like throw at you? I agree with that fully.
Yeah.
um Man, Pizza Tower. It's so good. I feel like unfortunately it's just going to be one of those games where it came out early in the year, and it had a little bit of its time in the shine. I was time in the sun. I was surprised that IGN even bothered to put out like a review video and at least one like P rank video to kind of demonstrate the gameplay. I was surprised that they did it, but I'm glad that they did. I know whoever reviewed it, props to you for probably having to push for that. Um, but yeah, like I feel it feels unfortunate that like Pizza Tower I think is one of the most well-made games I've played this year, and it's probably not going to get anywhere near the recognition it deserves. I'm glad that at least there is a dedicated online fan base that's recognizing just how good this game is.
Yeah, that's the thing you'll find with a lot of the indie games. Is that yeah, you may not see like the major press cover it, but you'll find a pretty vocal community sometimes behind these games, to where it's like they may not feel like the general public loves them enough, but the people who do love it a lot.
Yeah, they will pour their hearts and souls out to like demonstrate like how much of like this game is phenomenal and that is definitely like worth your time. I feel like that's kind of what happened with other titles like Doki Doki Literature Club and like Undertale in the past. So I can only hope that like kind of the same treatment happens for not just Pizza Tower. We talked a lot about Pizza Tower, but I also hoping for like some of the other indie games we talked about and mentioned so far on this podcast. Um, but Robert, I know we're kind of getting long in this podcast, so I
Yeah,
think
about an
uh
hour 50
yeah
minutes.
yeah. So we're gonna try to speed things along a little bit. We have a couple more segments now for Pizza Tower. Do you have any more parting thoughts? Because I think I'm all good
Yeah.
personally.
It's something to definitely check out. I believe it has a demo, maybe. No, was that the one that didn't
I
have a
said,
demo? Um, but
dang.
it's it's worth your time to check out. If I played trailers for all these games we talked about, so hopefully it probably grabbed your attention enough to want to look more into it. But yeah, it's a fun platformer, nice short game that you can knock out in an afternoon if you really wanted to. And it's a game that you can always keep going back to if you want to keep playing the levels better and better. Because again, when you finish the level, you get a rank at the end. So if you want to keep getting better ranks, the levels are very replayable for that.
All right, that's awesome, Robert. Thank you for that. I like I said, I'm in total agreement with Robert. All these games, like at Pizza Tower, maybe look up their website because, like, I seem to remember that there was some sort of demo for this game before it came out. Maybe not on Steam, but maybe on their website. Uh, but I at least for sure, Ultra Kill has one. Sea of Stars has one. Check out all these games; they're definitely worth your time, especially with Sea of Stars being on Game Pass. If you're already on that subscription service, just give it a shot. You never know.
Same with the PlayStation. If you have PlayStation Extra, I think it's definitely worth a shot.
Exactly. So like definitely like give these games like we really want to push this idea that like hey these games are as just as much of deserving as like attention as AAA because they are doing things that are creative and interesting in the space. Um so I think we are going to end with a couple more segments here. Uh, so the last indie game segment I'm going to talk about is I'm going to put out there what's an indie game that you're looking forward to playing. Now, for us, it doesn't have to be something has that's it doesn't have to be something that's on its way to coming out. It could be something that's already come out and you're already sitting in your Steam library backlog and you just haven't touched it yet, but you would like to. So, Robert, I'm going to toss it to you. What indie game are you looking forward to and why?
So, a game that I want to talk a little bit about is a little game called Lunar Lux. It's inspired off of the Mega Man Battle Network games on the Game Boy Advance that actually just launched yesterday at the time of recording this. But it's a pretty short game, about 10 hours ish long, I believe, that is essentially a love letter to like that whole Mega Man Battle Network series. From what I played of the demo, the characters have a lot of personality to them. There's a lot of little details in the world that are fun to point out. Like you can go inside this room and this guy has a Pokeball on a shelf and like an Undertale reference on like his wall and like with like a picture of like Frisk and Sans on the wall. Like neat little details like that. that I think really kind of bring out a lot of personality in this game. And the battle system is also pretty simple to grasp, but looks like it has a lot of complexity to it, especially later on when you get like another party member. So it seems like there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it. Um, so I'm looking forward to playing more of that because I did play a little bit of the demo. Um, it's something that I didn't really hear about until like my girlfriend talked about it, and she has a friend that actually had a little bit of input on the game. So I think that was really cool just to kind of vaguely know someone who helped to work on the development of this game, even if it wasn't like a major role. It feels a little more personal to me just because I'm acquainted with one of the people that works like or worked on this game.
Honestly, I that makes sense to me. I mean, it's like, every like even if it might seem small, I think every role is kind of important to the development of a game. You don't have to be just a project lead to mean that your efforts matter on this. Um, so yeah, that's like really cool. I personally like wasn't able to play a demo of it in time for this podcast, but I did look up like some trailers on it. It looks very interesting. I do like the art style, and like you mentioned, like with like the Mega Man Battle Network games, I believe is what you said.
Yes.
Uh, it to me, it just reminds me so much of I'm pretty sure it's very much on purpose. It reminds me a lot of the like just Game Boy Advance games I would play at the time. Just like that specific art style is like, yes, I've definitely like had experiences with this kind of game before. So yeah, it looks dope as shit. I'm definitely like looking forward to seeing whenever it comes out.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's reasonably priced too. It's a $20 game, and there's a launch sale right now. Though I don't know if it'll this podcast will be up in time still for it. But currently, it's on sale for $16. When it's off sale, it'll be 20. So I think that's a pretty good price for the kind of game you're getting. And there's a lot of little details in it that really like make it worth it. Like even if it's like a short game, there's just so much love and care put into it that I really want to support this.
right on, dude. And honestly, yeah, like I think with a lot of games we mentioned, like a $20 price tag, that's really not bad at all. That's honestly pretty good in my opinion. Um, so yeah, uh, then I'll go ahead and talk about. So for my game, the one that indie game I'm kind of looking forward to is one that's been sitting a little bit uh, for a while in my wish list. Is It's a game called Gloomwood. Um, Also happens to be published by New Blood Interactive, the people who publish Ultra Kill. Gloomwood, is it Gloomwood? Yeah, it is Gloomwood. I almost got it mixed up with another game that recently, like I think, came out called Gloomhaven. Two different things. Gloomwood is also in early access. They're still working on it. The best way I can describe it, Robert, to hopefully sell you on this idea, is it is a stealth-focused title, kind of in the vein of like the older Thief games.
Mm.
But interesting enough, it's also taken inspiration from like a lot of other titles, namely Resident Evil 4. It has
Oh.
the attache case inventory system, which is very fun. I've seen some people play around with that. But yeah, it's a game that's also still in early access, still being updated. But the visual style just kind of speaks to me. I really like the immersive style gameplay look of it, and I also just I don't know. I'm just a sucker for like kind of that gothic feel
Mm.
and just a good immersive sim. So yeah, that's the game I'm looking forward to is like Gloomwood. I'm definitely going to try it out. Like I said, it's still in early access. Really have no idea when it's going to be finished, much like Ultra Kill. But it's getting updates like every year, pretty substantial ones. So I'm looking forward to it.
Mm.
All right. So now this is the Fresh Podcast. We're going to talk about our fresh picks for the week. So, Robert, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. What is your fresh pick? Although I kind of have a feeling I know what's going to be.
Well, if your guess was the messenger, then you would be absolutely correct. Um,
Oh, okay, I was wrong.
or what were you
I
thinking?
I I thought you were going to recommend Separate Ways since you were recently playing that.
No, I wanted to keep it indie for this podcast. Um,
That's fair. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, so I brought this game up a couple times, The Messenger. Um, it's a 2D platformer that switches between 8-bit and 16-bit art styles, and same with the music as well. Um, where it's very obviously inspired by Ninja Gaiden from like the NES in terms of like its level design, in terms of its boss fights. It's very much an homage to that kind of game, but it's also so much more because there's, with some light spoilers here, there's a twist about halfway through the game, and it basically becomes an entirely different genre. So it goes from a linear Ninja Gaiden platformer to a full-on Metroidvania. And you go back and play through these levels you kind of stormed through before, and you just see how dynamic the level design is because they're perfectly designed to play them forward and backwards and just explore all these new little secrets through that. Um, the characters are pretty simple, but the writing is really good. Special shout out to the shopkeeper. I fucking love the
Oh yeah.
shopkeeper.
The shopkeeper is definitely I haven't really played through that game, but I have played like little bits of it, and I will say the best part about like the shopkeeper is he is that kind of character where whenever you keep talking to them, do they keep having more lines of dialogue or keep repeating themselves? He is that character where he's like, I have so many lines of dialogue. It's really funny.
And there's a little thing where it's like there's a cabinet in the shop. If you keep trying to open it, he'll just bore you with this very long, unskippable story as like kind of a punishment. It's like, hey, I told you to leave that alone, and now you have to listen to me talk for like 2 minutes. So it's some like good meta stuff going on there. Um, yeah, The Messenger, very good game. It's been out for a few years, and absolutely recommend trying it.
All right. Thank you, Robert, for that. I do also would say, even though I've only played like a couple of minutes of it when it was on Game Pass, I will say Messenger is definitely worth your time. It is a lot of it. It is. It's fun. It feels good, and it's very funny. All right. So for my fresh pick of the week, it's not a game, it's not a movie, it's not a show, it's not a music song. My fresh pick of the week is a book. Um, it's really not a fresh pick because it's older, but hey, Robert picked The Messenger and he played that years ago, so I think I'm free to do this too. I'm gonna recommend Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Book One, The Lightning Thief. I've
Oh,
been trying to, yeah, I've been trying to get back into reading, and I think about a few weeks ago, Disney dropped the trailer for the Percy Jackson television series. It is something that I am cautiously optimistic about. I know Disney lately has had, let's just say, inconsistent results with their Disney Plus series.
yeah.
Um, and Percy Jackson, unfortunately, when being translated to live action in the past, has not gone well. The two movies that they put out, Lightning Thief and Sea of Monsters, are basically just pale imitations of the books themselves. I think the writer behind the book, I'm not going to pronounce his last name just because
It was
I don't want to
Riordan.
embarrass my
I'll
Riordan.
embarrass myself.
All right. This is on Robert. If this is wrong, Rick Riordan. Even he has come out and said like, no, those two movies are god awful. I think he said something along the lines of like, he will literally send you his books to free to your class if you promise not to show them those movies because he's embarrassed by them so badly. Um, I've been paying attention. I've kind of known that they've been working on a television series for Percy Jackson for a while with Disney. Um, and I think they're also having Rick Riordan as like a big kind of consulting part on the show, which gives me a lot of hope. Um, and one things I love about the trailer is the fact that all the kids in it actually look like the age. They're not 20 somethings pretending to be teens. In
Like in the first
Lightning
movie.
Thief, they're like 13 years old. Like that's the whole point of the story is they're just turning 13. That's when like their powers start to awaken.
Right.
But I feel like I'm talking a lot around it, so I better just dive into it. The Lightning Thief follows the story of Percy Jackson, who learns very quickly that he is actually one of the sons of Poseidon. He is a demigod, which means he has some portion of his godly father's powers. In this world, it's a modern world much like ours, except the Greek gods and goddesses and all those mythological figures do exist in that world. The idea is that us, like normal humans, don't perceive it because a spell called the Mist is cast on all of us, so we don't see this weird stuff happening. But people who are half bloods, like Percy, like Annabeth, does. It's Listen, Percy Jackson has always kind of been in the shadow of Harry Potter. I don't think that's been a secret, but I've always been more of a Percy Jackson kid myself. I love this book series. The first book, as I'm reading through it, it's a bit simple, but my God, is it fun. Not only does Percy just is a great narrator who just has a lot of like nice little like sort of sarcastic bits in his dialogue, but there's also really good touching character moments between friends and family in these books. Um, Percy is great. His friend group is great. His mom is great. Chiron is also great. I just love this book to pieces. I read it religiously as a kid, and it just feels so magical, and it just feels like you're just going on an adventure. And at the same time, I also feel like that this book series is so empowering for kids who felt like outcasts when growing up. A big point of this book is about empowering children who have learning disabilities like ADHD and dyslexia. According to the world of Percy Jackson, it kind of shows that like to them, ADHD and dyslexia are kind of like they're ways that they're results of them being half bloods, being demigods, and in a way, it's almost like a power. Dyslexia helps them easier to translate ancient Greek. Um, they The ADHD is kind of like their ability to act in emergency situations. Like it's all these like little interesting things, and I really appreciate just like how empowering this book is for that kind of like audience. So it feels like a very positive kind of story wrapped up in just a fun adventure. Um, I really recommend checking out The Lightning Thief. I've been very nostalgic, and I have to say it has not failed to deliver on me rereading this story.
Yeah, I remember I would read these books back in like middle school. Um, Regrettably, I've forgotten a lot about them, but as you're talking more, I'm just kind of like unlocking some, I guess, core memories from reading these books.
Oh,
'Cause it's been so
Robert
long, but I remember they were really good.
Robert, let me tell you this. I did not even remember what the mist was until 2 days ago when I started reading this book. And like literally, it's like unlocking a part of your brain, and all of a sudden, this wealth of knowledge comes pouring out. It's like, oh, I can't Half Blood. And the reason like Percy Jackson was married to his disgusting stepdad was because he's so mundane and disgusting that it actually masked Percy from monsters that was hunting him. It's just like, oh, that's interesting. But oh God, I love this book series. I highly recommend at least starting with like Lightning Thief. It's really good. All right. Well, Robert, I think we're reached the end of the podcast. Do you have anything else for us before we decide to sign off?
Just play more indie games. Look out for some smaller projects. See anything that looks interesting. It might have a Kickstarter. Try to back the devs. Show the smaller stuff some love, because if us kind of going on for almost 2 hours about these smaller things is enough to go by, is that we can get really passionate about these things. Like you might play through like a big AAA game like a God of War and be like, "Oh, this was really good," and not think much about it. There's just so much like to talk about with these indie games, so much little things to notice, and how much like care is put into these. Again, not that things like God of War don't have that put in, but I feel like it those kind of things don't have the kind of personality that games like Pizza Tower, Sea of Stars, Ultra Kill have. So definitely try to support the smaller things.
Exactly. In a lot of ways, it's kind of like discovering a small little band that no one has ever heard of, but something about this band and their music and their lyrics just resonates with you personally. Listen, I'm like Robert here, where I'm looking forward to the next Spider-Man game, like anybody else. If they announce like a Last of Us 3, I'll jump in on that. If they announce like another Halo that's going to be delayed like 50 years, I'll probably get excited for that too. But But the thing is with the AAA space is like, as we kind of mentioned before, a lot of times there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen and they have like so much money and they can go in all these different directions. But I think the things that indies can deliver is, as Robert also pointed out, very personal and intimate like subjects and just passion projects that I think when you find an indie game that resonates with you, a lot of times it's going to beat out any other AAA thing you've ever played this year. I can almost guarantee that. Like it really will. Um, so go out, experiment, try something new. And also, even though we've talked about some really good polished products, there's a lot of indie games out there that may not be the most polished product, but give those a chance too. Every now and then, try out a messy indie game. You might be surprised at what you find. All right. Robert, thank you for coming on to the show. We appreciate your company as always.
Absolutely.
All right. And we're signing off. Thank you and take care, everybody.